Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are plunging into Ondas Holdings, that's ticker ONDS. And this is a really fascinating company. They're right at the cutting edge of, well, two pretty different but fast-moving tech frontiers, autonomous drones and critical industrial wireless networks. Yeah, they're making some serious moves in both defense and vital infrastructure. That combination, it definitely caught our eye. So, our mission today, we want to explore Ondas's unique business model, really break down their latest financial performance, get a sense of what analysts are saying, and unpack their future potential. And why should this matter to you listening? Well, whether you're into cutting-edge tech, national security, or just how a fast-growing public company works, Ondas has a pretty compelling story. But I guess the first thing that jumps out, for me at least, is this dual focus: railroads and defense drones. Seems almost, well, contradictory on the surface. How do these two really create a strategic advantage? Or is it just, spreading themselves a bit thin?
That's a really fair question because first glance they look pretty separate, but I think the real genius, or maybe the potential genius, lies in what's underneath. You've got this need for ultra secure, really resilient data transmission, right? Autonomous decision making, protecting critical stuff. And while the applications are totally different, one's moving freight, the other's spotting threats, the core IP, the technology, it's leveraged across both. So it's not just two separate businesses. It's more like this feedback loop of innovation. It builds a stronger defense, a wider moat than maybe a single focused competitor could manage. Now, is there a risk? Always. Spreading thin is always a risk, but their talk about a unified operating platform suggests they're really trying to find those synergies to avoid that exact problem.
Okay, that makes sense. A strategic flywheel, not just two separate engines. Okay, let's unpack this setup then. Ondas Holdings, core business built on these two divisions. You said synergistic. So first up, Ondas Networks. This part is all about that secure, reliable IoT connectivity, but specifically for critical infrastructure. They use their own radio platform, full max SDR. Think of it like a private, super secure wireless network built for tough jobs. It's based on this standard, IEEE 802.16t, designed for really robust long-range industrial comms.
Exactly. It's not your home Wi-Fi. This is serious stuff, like the head of train and end of train system they mentioned. That's the link connecting the engineer miles up front to the very last car. Vital for safety, efficiency. It's tech you absolutely rely on, but you probably never even see it.
Right, essential but invisible. Okay, then there's the other side. Ondas Autonomous Systems, or OAS. This is where the AI-powered drones come in, mostly for defense and homeland security. They've got some pretty interesting products. Optimus, that's for public safety, like in cities. An intelligent eye in the sky, basically. And then Iron Drone. That's a counter-drone system. Counter-UAS, they call it. And it's apparently combat-proven, even deployed at a European airport under a NATO order.
Yeah, so you see the range there from, keeping trains safe to high-stakes defense. It's broad. And what's really insightful, I think, is how Ondas seems to view it. It's not just two product lines side by side. It's about providing solutions across both critical civilian and defense areas using similar core tech. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, like their CDO Eric Brock says, they're deliberately building an operating platform that goes beyond individual products. That vision integrates things like autonomous ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drones, doing their own data gathering and analysis. Combine that with counter-drone stuff, and you get a much more complete offering. It really does position them quite uniquely.
It really does sound unique. Okay, so broad potential, ambitious vision that needs serious financial backing, right? So let's see how they're actually funding this. Let's dive into their latest numbers. Q2 2025 earnings just came out, and they tell a pretty compelling story. They reported revenue hitting $6.3 million. That's a sixfold jump year over year. It was $1 million in Q2 last year, and up 50% just from Q1.
Wow, sixfold. Yeah. And on top of that, they beat the analyst forecast pretty handily by over 26%. And it wasn't just revenue. Their earnings per share, EPS, that came in better than expected too, -$0.08, but the forecast was for -$0.10. So a 20% beat there. And the market noticed. The stock jumped, 23% in pre-market trading? That's a pretty strong signal of confidence from investors.
Yeah, it is, and it's important to put those numbers in context. Like you said, $6.3 million might sound, well, modest maybe for a public company in absolute terms, but that rate of growth, that sixfold increase and beating expectations by that much, that's significant. It shows they're getting traction, their execution is strong, especially in these newer areas like counter-UAS, suggests the strategy is starting to really pay off. Oh, and that 53% gross margin you mentioned earlier, that's also a good sign. It shows they're making decent money on the products themselves, even if overall profitability isn't there yet because of spending. It can be volatile early on, but it's positive. Right. Okay, so the organic growth is impressive, but they're not just waiting for that, are they? They seem to be making some pretty aggressive strategic moves, acquisitions, partnerships. This seems like where the long-term vision really takes shape.
Exactly. That CEO quote again, 2025 is being defined as the breakout year, building an operating platform. That really sums up this phase. They're layering in tech and market access. Look at the investment in Rift Dynamics, that Norwegian company, securing U.S. rights for their WASP drone. That's a low-cost, almost disposable drone. Fits right into what the DoD is looking for. Cheap to use, cheap to lose. Scale is the idea there.
Okay, so drones, but not just flying ones.
Right. They're moving into ground robotics, too, buying a Paramotion. They talk about multi-domain autonomy, basically, controlling and coordinating stuff in the air and on the ground from one system. And then Zickel Engineering, an Israeli firm. That brings in serious defense engineering expertise and deeper military customer relationships. It's about bolstering that defense credibility.
Makes sense. And what about partnerships? They seem key, too.
Absolutely. Mistral, for instance. That partnership helps them navigate the sometimes tricky world of U.S. government procurement for Iron Drone and Optimus, getting those federal contracts. Then Detroit Manufacturing Systems, DMS, that's huge for making things here in the U.S., compliant with defense rules, NDAA, strengthens the supply chain, helps control costs. Very important for government work.
Okay, and funding all this expansion. You mentioned something about non-dilutive funding.
Yeah, the K-Clear partnership, they expanded that. It provides credit facilities, basically loans that are specifically not tied to issuing new stock. So they get working capital for inventory, for receivables to fuel that growth without diluting existing shareholders by selling more shares. That's a smart way to fund rapid expansion if you can get it. These aren't just random deals, they're building blocks for that bigger platform.
And it seems like the timing might be right, too. There's movement on the regulatory side for drones.
Yeah, the FAA's new rules for beyond visual line of sight BVLOS drone operations. That sounds like a pretty big deal for the whole industry, right? Opens up a lot of possibilities. It's a huge moment, and Ondas was apparently quite visible there, showcasing their Optimus and Iron drone systems at the FAA's announcement. That lends them a lot of credibility, shows they're seen as players in this space.
So connecting the dots, these strategic moves, the regulatory tailwinds, it all feeds into their goals.
Precisely. They're aiming for DoD contracts by the end of this year. They're expanding geographically Europe, Middle East, US, Asia, and they're working on getting their systems onto the green-blue UAS list. That's critical for widespread DoD adoption, basically a seal of approval for security and reliability. A very multi-pronged global strategy.
Okay, the strategy sounds ambitious, the growth numbers are impressive, but let's talk financial health. Can they actually fund all this? That's always a big question of a company's growing this fast.
Yeah, and this is where their balance sheet looks, frankly, quite strong. They called it a massive competitive advantage, and you can see why. They finished Q2 with $68.6 million in cash.
Right.
That's way up from $30 million at the end of last year. And maybe even more importantly, they paid off all their convertible notes in July. So the holding company has zero debt now.
Zero debt. Wow.
Zero holding company debt. That gives them tremendous flexibility. They can pursue growth, make acquisitions, weather bumps in the road without that pressure of debt payments hanging over them. That's a really strong position to be in.
Okay, strong cash position, zero debt. But we still see those reports of negative EBIT margin, negative profit margin. How should we think about that? Isn't that usually a red flag?
It's a very fair point to raise. And yeah, for a mature company, it would be. But for a company like Ondas, in this rapid scaling phase, it's actually pretty typical. Think of it this way. EBIT margin shows operating profit before interest and taxes. Negative means their current revenues, even though they're growing fast, don't yet cover all the operating costs. And those costs went up too, $12.6 million in Q2. That's part of this aggressive investment strategy you mentioned. They're spending heavily now on R&D, sales, building things out to capture that future market.
So sacrificing profit now for bigger scale later.
Exactly. The goal isn't immediate net profit. It's to reach a point of significant operating leverage. That means as revenue keeps climbing, the cost to generate each new dollar of revenue goes down. Your profit margins then start to expand significantly. And remember that 53% gross margin the CFO mentioned. That shows the underlying products are profitable before you factor in all that growth spending. So that the potential for future profit is there, even if it's volatile right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So putting it all together, the strategy, the financials, the growth, what's the verdict from the experts? What are analysts saying? about Ondas's potential?
Well, the consensus among the Wall Street analysts covering them, firms like Needham, Lake Street, is consistently a strong buy. That's a pretty bullish signal. And the median price target tends to hover around $5 compared to where it's trading now, around $3.61. That suggests, significant potential upside, about 38-39%.
Okay, but you mentioned volatility earlier.
Yeah, that's important context. The stock has a high beta 1.97. Basically, that means it tends to be almost twice as volatile as the overall market. Moves up faster potentially, but also down faster, higher risk, higher potential reward. It's definitely something investors need to be aware of. But despite that volatility, analysts clearly see more growth ahead.
Got it. High growth, high potential, but also higher risk.
Yeah.
And what about Ondas themselves? What are they forecasting? What's their guidance?
They've stuck to their guns on the full year 2025 revenue target, at least $25 million, and they expect over $20 million of that just from the autonomous systems side, OAS. Looking out to 2026, they've laid out a path to hit $40 million in revenue just from autonomous systems, and that's before factoring in any new acquisitions. Those would add on top of that number.
So the acquisitions are purely additive to that $40 million target?
That's the message, yeah. Accretive is the term they use. They also mentioned a growing backlog, $22 million, and expect bookings over $23 million just in the second half of this year. That sets up 2026 nicely. And they're not done with deals. They reiterated they plan at least 2 strategic acquisitions more in 2025 besides the ones we already talked about. So that inorganic growth lever is still very much in play.
Okay, lots of positive momentum, ambitious plans. But we should probably touch on the risks too, right? No company operates in a vacuum.
Absolutely. You always have to consider the potential downsides. Regulatory hurdles, especially in the drone space, could always slow things down. Competition is fierce in autonomous systems, lots of players wanting a piece of that pie, which could pressure pricing or margins. There's also a dependence on defense contracts. Government budgets can shift, priorities can change. That's always a risk factor. And then you have the usual suspects. Potential supply chain issues, broader economic uncertainty that could make customers hesitant to spend. These are all real factors to keep an eye on.
Right. Good to keep that balanced perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like Ondas Holdings is really planting its flag at an interesting intersection of technologies. We saw strong financial momentum in Q2, revenue growth that's frankly pretty stunning, beating forecasts.
Yeah.
And they're clearly executing this ambitious growth strategy, innovation, plus those smart partnerships and acquisitions, building out that whole ecosystem.
Yeah, the core message seems to be they're aggressively building this integrated operating platform. They want to capitalize on what looks like surging global demand for autonomous systems, defense, security, critical infrastructure. And they've got that much stronger balance sheet now, the cash, the zero debt to really fuel that. Plus, the positive analyst sentiment definitely doesn't hurt. It looks like a company with a very clear vision, and now, maybe, the financial one-way to really go after it, even if near-term profit isn't the main focus.
So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Given how fast drone tech is moving and this global demand for security solutions, how might this operating platform approach that Ondas is taking, how might that change things? Not just for their market, but maybe the whole landscape of national security of critical infrastructure in the years ahead. Think about the tasks, dangerous manual tasks today that could be fully automated by these kinds of systems. What new possibilities, even new industries might spin out from that. Definitely worth considering the longer-term ripples of these dual-use technologies and the role companies like Ondas are aiming to play in, well, shaping what comes next.